Okay, we're gonna try this again. Hello, everybody. Hi, B. We're in.
Yeah,
Hi.
hi.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Sorry about the technical difficulties. I don't know what was
That's
happening. Let's see. Uh-oh. Okay, let's see what happened. Okay. I think it keeps freezing. Okay, I see you. Sorry, you froze for a little. Um, Welcome.
thank
Um,
you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. Um, Today on Spill the Tea, we are going to be talking about how mental health is seen among women of color, discuss some of the stigmas regarding mental health, how these stigmas affect women of color specifically, and how culture plays a role into all of this. So, today we do have Alissa from the APU Counseling Center with us. So Alissa, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Alissa
Oh,
Melendez. Yes, and I'm a staff psychologist at the University Counseling Center.
perfect. And how long have you been working with APU?
Yes, I've been working with APU for about 2 years, and I am one of their people of color working there as a staff psychologist.
Awesome. I love to hear that. So before we kind of get started into our conversation, I did want to make sure, just since we're here, we're live, I want to extend our love and support to our Asian American and Pacific Islander community during this time. Um, the act of racism that occurred this week in Atlanta is disheartening. It's upsetting. And I want our Asian and Pacific Islander students to know that we're here for you. We stand with you. We have no room for hate here at APU. With that being said, I do also want to talk about some of the resources that are available for our students if anybody needs support during this time. So if you or somebody you know is experiencing, racism or exposed to racism or anything like that, you can fill out a bias incident report, which can be found at apu.edu diversity bias. And that will be taken into account and sent to the vice president. And they will contact you to further talk about and support you in whatever happened. There's also APU Cares. So if you or somebody that you know is experiencing hardship, or even one of your classmates in your class, you see that they're struggling right now with everything that's going on, you can refer them through APU Cares. It can be anonymous, and somebody will reach out to them just to make sure that they're okay, and to provide any other resources that they may need. We also do have the lovely APU Counseling Center, which I have visited a few times, and I love it. They're very, they're very helpful there. Everybody, they really care about the success of their students, and the well-being of their students. We also do have campus pastors that can meet with you and pray with you during this hard time. And we do have our ethnic organizations as well if you want to connect with others in your community. I know sometimes it is important to connect with those that are in your own community. So please don't hesitate to reach out here at, through Instagram or through email. Reach out to the SCRD office, and we will help you get connected with whatever resources you may need. So I just wanted to make sure to address that. So now that I have kind of gone through that, we can kind of start with our conversation. So first, what influenced you to get into the mental health field?
Wow, that's a great question. So, my interest in the mental health field and really the field of psychology began at a young age and is really connected to my background. So, growing up in a Mexican family where my grandparents were first generation and were assimilating to the American culture, there were a lot of different events and circumstances, including immigration, acculturation, some death and trauma, and even generational conflicts that I had noticed impacted my family for generations. And each family member had developed a sense of resiliency and admirable resiliency through these experiences. However, they never talked about their mental health. It was something that they didn't just address or they just didn't kind of talk about before. And as a result, this kept happening generations and generations. We kept moving forward, kind of suffering in silence in a way. And like many other families in the Latinx culture and community, I remember it just being really difficult to do that. And my mom was the first to become aware of this, and she recognized our need to talk about our emotional distress and our need for counseling. She really did encourage my brother and I to talk with her or someone about the events in our lives that were impacting us. But I still remember having difficulty letting go of some of the cultural barriers that were preventing me from addressing that pattern. So as I got to know more about psychology and the mental health, I figured out that I wanted to understand mental health from a different perspective and to help give others a voice, others who maybe have had similar experiences to me, to give them a voice in order to heal.
I love that so much. And I feel like I resonate with your story as well. Um, my parents are first generation, and my mom, I feel like in my family, was really the only one that talked about mental health. But like you said, even then, it's those cultural cycles that we kind of want to try to break, right? And that's something that like I focus on so much with like the younger generations of my family, with my nieces and nephews. I'm just always talking to them and like, how are you feeling? Like, oh, you're angry. Like, why are you angry? Not just, and I know especially like in the Latinx cultures, it's kind of like, no, like you know, you listen to your parents and you listen to the adults, and that's that. But there's more to it. We need to understand each other,
Yeah.
especially the kids, and especially with everything that's going on right now. So I love that, and yeah, I think it that's kind of influenced me as well to be, a big mental health advocate. So yeah. So let me ask you, in your experience of working with women of color, what are the most common stigmas related to mental health that you've seen?
Yeah. There's quite a few. One of them, as I already mentioned, is that suffering in silence. Like we don't talk about these things. We don't talk about the things that have impacted us and how they impacted us. Because if we happen to talk about those things, we might be viewed as weak or not as strong as other people. The other thing that I've noticed that could be a stigma that challenges help seeking behavior is sometimes we tell ourselves other people have it worse, or we look at our family background and our family history and we see where we've come and how far we've come. And we sometimes tell ourselves, like, oh, well, we shouldn't feel this way because we've been through so much. We should be strong. And so there's this, even though resiliency is such a great thing, it also can be something that can be internalized as a barrier to seeking help and to talking about some really difficult things. The other thing that I think I see sometimes is maybe not necessarily seeing a problem as it is. We tend to minimize our problems because there's just a lot going on. We have so many things on our plate that we don't have time to deal with this or time to kind of sit down and think about these things and how to navigate some really difficult things that can impact who we are and our identity.
Yeah, I think especially that second point, it's like we don't have, we don't have time. We're too busy, but it's like I feel like, sometimes I don't realize that how much like I need to make time for this, because if I don't make time for my mental health or to take care of my mental health, I'm not going to be okay having to do the other five things that I have to do. I'm going to be stressed. My anxiety is going to go up. Like, and I think that's like, that is so common. And, I feel like especially like, women, we are made to carry on so many different roles, right? And so it's like, it's important to prioritize that mental health. And so, yeah, I think, yeah, I've definitely resonated with some of those stigmas. And so, how do you see culture play a role in service seeking among women? So, like, do you see that it usually prevents them from seeking services, or like, especially even like on campus, like how do you see that play a role with our students from seeking services?
Yeah, I think culture does play a role in help seeking or seeking services. It can be a challenge to overcome some of the stigmas or some of even just the messages that we've received from our own culture about mental health. First of all, so just being able to say, hey, mental health is a thing. So sometimes that prevents us from even coming in and recognizing we do have something that's impacting us. The other thing is sometimes culture, we get messages from culture about we're not supposed to talk about these things outside of our family. So we're not supposed to talk about these things with other people who are not within our family unit or just who are not involved in the experience. And so sometimes that can prevent people from coming in and talking to an outside person. I think too, sometimes if we talk to people who are professionals, it can bring to light the reality of the situations. Like this is a big deal. This is something that is impacting me even more than I would like to realize or recognize. So I see it kind of impacting students seeking our services that way. I think too, representation's a big thing as well. People want to talk, students want to talk to people who look like them. And so they want to be able to know that they're going to be understood and heard and not have to go through some of the experiences that they're experiencing outside of therapy, like explaining their own culture, or explaining their own behavior, or having that spotlight effect. So that could also be another way that culture can impact someone coming in. They may not know that we have counselors who look like them. They may not see somebody who they think can understand them, but we are all trained to be culturally competent, and we try to hold that space for everybody, even if they may look like us or be different from us.
That's great. And yeah, that's so true. I do think that people tend to, want to seek help by people that look like them, just for that, you know, um, being able to relate. Um, how do you go about, so if a student comes in, and, you know, they tell you, you know, they haven't come, this is new for them, you know, they're not really sure yet, you know, they kind of like what you said, they're not used to talking to other people outside of their family. Um, so how do you address that with them? Like if they were to come in like their first session, how do you address that with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say we really try to make it easy from the beginning of our interactions. We have a great admin who just is friendly, personable, and really tries to meet the students where they're at. And that's exactly not only what our admin person does, but what each one of our counselors do. We try to create this safe space so students can come in and share whatever is on their mind. We do try to encourage students to just be open and vulnerable. And we understand that this is a hard process. Many of our counselors have been through counseling themselves, so they know what it's like to be on that other end. So we try just to build rapport with people, just try to relate with people. Also, just try to encourage people to share their stories. The more that we understand another person's perspective, the more that we can meet them and where they're at, not only with what they need, but also with how their culture is impacting them and how their culture is relating to and intersecting with their mental health. And so we do have a lot of conversations around that, and we encourage discussion and question that because we understand that the intersection of multiple identities is a big impact, especially for our young adults, and especially for our people of color, and especially for our women of color.
Right.
Yeah. So just holding this space and trying to be open with our clients and just being kind and encouraging them to talk, have those conversations, and even encouraging them to let us know what is it like to share these things with us. It's new. Trying to normalize that experience, I think, is what we try to do best.
Right. And I think that you said like the key word is normalize, you know, because again, you know, a common stigma of mental health is it's only for, you know, crazy people, or it's only when something's wrong. And it's like, that's, you know, I go to therapy, and sometimes I go to therapy just because I want to talk about, you know, how to balance, you know, work life and school life and my side business. And it's like, I just need to know. And I think that's like what I also want, you know, students to know is like, you don't just need to go to talk to somebody when, you know, when you're in a, you know, a state of anxiety, or which of course, like you should, but it's like, it's not just for, you know, when something's going wrong in your life. Like, it's just like, you know, if you have a medical question, or, you know, you want to be healthier, so you make an appointment with your doctor, you want to know how, you know, so it's like, and that's, I think, so important for people to know is like, it's your mental health, but it's just like your overall health, you know. You make an appointment to the doctors, you can make an appointment, you know, to the counselor. And I think that's why I'm so open with it, so open with like talking about like, oh yeah, I go to therapy, like I suggest therapy to everybody. I'm just like, oh, you know, but it's because it should be normalized. Like it shouldn't be like a weird topic, or, you know, like, you know, discussing, you know, mental health, or, and so, yeah, I love that you mentioned, you know, trying to normalize that. What are some of the biggest barriers that you see among women of color that they face when it comes to mental health versus, you know, white women?
That's a great question. I would say that some of the barriers could be similar at times. That I think what is different is the layers of of what's happening for a woman of color. The intersectionality for a woman of color is a little bit more complex, I would say, and a little bit more challenging at times. I know specifically for women of color sometimes, and even this could be true for myself, I have this, and we mentioned it before, this idea that I have so much on my plate, I have so many roles and responsibilities, and it's going to be hard to set that aside and prioritize myself and my self-care. Even though it's something that is good for our overall well-being, it's not something that we always practice, and it's not something that was taught to us as a woman of color. We were in a lot of ways, whether it was through systemic messages, cultural messages, but we were taught to be women of action and women of doing, and not necessarily having a slower pace and caring for ourselves. We care for others. So I think that's sometimes one of the barriers that can be more challenging for a woman of color. They just happen to be juggling more roles, especially if they're living at home, especially if they're working and going to school. And this could be, again, true for other women as well. But I think I see this more often in women of color. So I think that's one thing. I also think that there's more, as I mentioned, more complexities to the intersectionality. It's harder to talk about those things openly with other people. It's harder to talk about, I've experienced racism and what is this like? And sometimes you get some fatigue even around advocacy. And so having to go in and talk more about, this is how I'm fatigued from advocating, or this is how I'm fatigued from just being me and be present, can be challenging. And that's something that I think women of color can face, and it could be a barrier to counseling. Even though it's good to talk about those things and process those things, it's also draining, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
So I know, you are a woman of color in the mental health field. What are some barriers that you have experienced yourself, both in your life and in your journey of becoming a psychologist?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's been quite a few different barriers and related to just systemic racism, even in a sense. So just, and even being a first generation college student, there's been even barriers in that, and just kind of the intersections of those identities. I think that being part of those two groups have got me a lot of different places, but it's also been challenging in regards to just getting my education and navigating my education. There's only about 5% of people of color who have graduate degrees. So I didn't have anybody to kind of look at who paved the path for me. I was the first person in my family to get my degree. I was the first woman of color to get my doctorate degree. And so that was a challenge, to not have anybody to model after, in a sense, and to be able to share that story with. I think too, navigating workplace has been interesting, not in a bad way, but there's just still some challenges in regards to being a person of color. I've worked at various universities, but as a minority, a person of color at most my universities that where I am a minority has been challenging. It's been awesome to get certain roles, to be able to provide certain services to students, like our women of color group or other options like that. And though it's been a challenge to even see that when I arrive that those spaces aren't created. So it's always a both and, I think, in this field, as I navigate and break down some barriers, yet also face some things as a woman of color too.
Right. I totally resonated with what you said about being a first generation student, because I feel like a lot of times, I've had people tell me, well, yeah, but you get all of these things, you get these grants and you get these scholarships, or there's more programs for you, and it's like, yes, but that's because I literally don't, like, I'm the first one in my family to do this. Mm-hmm. So I have no idea what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. My parents have no idea how to help me. So I totally get that. And like, that's one of the things, but I also think that kind of helped me in my, in my independence, but also, especially now, trying to be in student affairs and higher education, I see the importance of getting that help and seeking those services. And I wish that I would have done that like in my undergrad, um, because I feel like my journey might have been a little bit different. Um, I would have been maybe a little bit more confident in what I
Mm-hmm.
was doing. But at the end of the day, you know, I still made it. And, you know, I'm still here, graduate student, part of that 5%. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, no, I totally get that.
Yeah. I was just going to say it's definitely real. And I agree with you. I was not somebody who sought help when I was an undergraduate. It wasn't until I was even closer to towards the end of my graduate program. And just it was challenging to seek that help, but when I got it, it was like a whole new world. It was empowering in a lot of ways. And when you had said that you know if you would have sought it earlier, you might have been more confident. I definitely agree with that. I wanted to highlight that was another thing that I struggled with, not only as a student, but even professionally, was the imposter syndrome, the challenges with confidence and anxiety. And am I qualified to be here? Am I confident enough to be here? And how do I hold this seat at the table when I'm stepping into this role as a woman of color? And again, I haven't had those examples before. And so imposter syndrome was definitely a real factor too along the way, in even professionally and in my education as well.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that imposter syndrome. Even now, sometimes, you know, it still affects me, and I'm just like, am I fit for this? You know, am I like, do I know what I'm doing? But it's like, if I wasn't meant to be in this role, I wouldn't be here, right?
Exactly.
Um, but yeah, it's just having that guidance definitely helps. And I see that now, and so that's why it's now I'm like I'm trying to enter this field to be to make sure that people know like this is all here for you, like all these services, counseling services, you know, EOPS, like all of this is here to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love that. How have you seen the or has there been a shift in seeking services since the pandemic hit? And
Mm-hmm.
what have you seen that has either increased or decreased among um, not just women of color, but among students in general at APU?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So we definitely have seen a shift in help seeking services in the pandemic. We've actually seen a little bit of a shift in regards to there's been less seeking services, but the people who are seeking services definitely are struggling and juggling with more things, especially as the pandemic is continues to go on and there's a lot of uncertainty around it. And in the midst of this, we're also facing the racial injustice and political injustices that have been occurring over the last year. It's been a year of traumatic times, and so I think that's what we've seen is actually more people coming in and recognizing their trauma, not only related to these events, but as you experience trauma, sometimes you are reacting to events that are in your history that may be unresolved. And so a lot of our work has been focused around anxiety because there is so much unknown around what's going to happen in the next steps. There's been some symptoms and presentations of depression just because we don't know what's going to change and when things are going to change. And then this recognition of trauma and the impact of trauma, and especially as we're living it and how people are navigating it. So we've definitely seen that. We've definitely seen more students seek services just because, as I mentioned, some of the systemic racism that people are starting to recognize and advocate for as well.
Right. Um, yeah, I think from what I'm seeing in like my peers, myself, it's like trying to still do everything in life that you normally would, and then with all this extra everything that's going on, you know, um, it's a lot. It's a lot to handle. It's a lot to handle on your own, and it's definitely like that unknown. Like, I don't
Mhm.
think I've ever been in such an unknown state in my life like we are now. It's like we have, is COVID going to get better ever? Are we ever going to go kind of back to what we used to be? Like, and
Mhm.
it's also like a form of grief. Like, you're
Mhm.
grieving the life that was a year ago, and of course we've had so many people, pass away, and um,
Mhm.
I lost my uncle due to COVID, and it's like having to navigate through all these things, like it's so overwhelming. It's so it's
Mhm.
just, I don't know. It's like that's why it's
It's
yeah, that's why I'm like, it's so important, and I tell people, seek the help that you need. Like,
mhm.
if there was ever a time in your life, it's now. Because
Exactly, yeah.
yeah, it's just crazy. Um, so I know you mentioned that the center has a women's group. What other services um, or support groups, does the counseling center provide for the students at APU?
Of course, that's a great question. We actually have quite a few services. We offer individual counseling for students, and all of these services are free, actually. So I want to make note of that. Students can access them for free, and we are doing everything telehealth right now in this season. And so we do offer individual counseling services. We have some great educational workshops that can empower students to gain more knowledge and skills around mental health. So those workshops include our anxiety toolbox workshop, our living well workshop. We also have group counseling options, which are great for just building community, but also being able to be vulnerable and talk about mental health with your peers in a lot of different ways. We have a women's emotional wellness group. We even have a boundaries group this semester, as well as a self growth group. And we have a student of color group this semester that we are excited about. We are trying to offer space for student of colors to talk about and process some of the things that they've been going through, not only with life in general, but with the pandemic and also with the social injustice that they've been experiencing. So those are the groups, the workshops, and individual counseling services that we offer.
That's so great. I love that. And um, wow, I didn't even know of some of those. And I'm like, man, I need to sign up for these. I need to take
Yeah.
advantage of these. Um, no, but that's great. I'm so happy that APU is being proactive, and providing these support groups, especially. I feel like one of the important, well, they're all important, but for me, the boundaries group, that is awesome. I think that is something that I struggle with, trying to balance out so many different things, and family, and being in grad school, and it's like it gets so overwhelming. um, so I might have to check that one out.
Yeah,
um,
definitely.
but yeah, I appreciate the work that you all do. And Nathaniel, he's amazing at getting all the word out and working with me. And um I think it is empowering to see a woman of color in your position, because it's it's admirable, and I feel like it gives us women of color, um it gives us a chance. I feel like, you know,
Mhm.
and it gives us that ability to relate with somebody, and to know that like somebody is there for us and understands us. So, I just really appreciate you. And um, do you have any other piece of advice for a woman, or for students in general, regarding mental health, or seeking services, or who are too afraid to seek services right now?
Mhm. Hmm. Yeah. I would just reiterate that your mental health is hugely important and it's a big aspect not only of your overall well being, but of who you are. I would encourage you to seek services now. It's okay to come and talk about anything and everything. I have some great conversations with students too about just how to reach goals that they want. So, mental health is for everyone and it impacts everyone. We all have a health and we all have mental health. And so, I just encourage people to seek help and support for that. And if you have any questions, call the counseling center. We're here to support you all.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm so happy we were able to talk about the subject, and it's a, like I mentioned before, I'm a very big mental health advocate, and it's just important, if this is National Women's History Month, to talk about one of the most important aspects of a woman, and that is mental health. I mean, it's an important aspect of everybody, but so I just really appreciate you coming on today and, giving us your expertise and talking about even your own journey. I think there's a power in talking about your own journey, and so I really appreciate it.
Of course. Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yes, definitely, and hopefully we'll be able to get the counseling center on Spill the Tea again. So thank you again, and we'll see you next time.
Yes. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.